Hey, this video is going to walk you through how to do the period of a mass spring system activity. So first you're going to open up the simulation and you want to go into lab. So make sure you're following what it says here. You're going to minimize and click on these different things. Minimize the energy graph, click on displacement, put damping, make sure you put it to none, that's really important. Pull out the ruler and pull out the stopwatch. I would also advise clicking on slow here so that it's easier to time the periods. The first thing asks us, does mass affect the period of a mass spring system? So that means mass is going to be the independent variable. That's the thing we're going to change. So we're going to start with the smallest mass. It doesn't really matter if you pick 50 or not, but start with a small mass. The dependent variable, the thing we're measuring each time, is going to be the period. And the controls are going to be the things that aren't going to change. So you can even look down here. We are not going to change the displacement. We are not going to change the spring constant. We are going to change the mass, notice. And we are not going to change the acceleration due to gravity. Okay, so you're going to keep the displacement the same every time. So when you put this over here, we're going to put our mass on here, and every time you're going to pull it down the same amount. So it doesn't matter what displacement you pick, but you're going to pull it down the same amount every time. So I'm just going to pick 30. Notice it's in centimeters, that's fine. I'm going to pick my mass, and I am allowing you just to put that in grams since we're not doing a calculation. You don't need to change it. You need to pick a spring constant, just don't change it. So I'm on click 1, 2, 3, 4. And my acceleration due to gravity, I'm just using Earth. So notice the displacement's going to stay the same every time, so just make sure you fill that down. The spring constant will stay the same. Again, you don't have to use my numbers, but the mass should be changing. So you're going to pull it down and let it bounce, and you're going to time, since it's in slow mode, you could just do 3 periods. So you need 3 complete up and downs. So I'm going to start timing at the bottom. So that would be 1, this would be 2, and this would be 3. So it's 1.7 seconds. Notice that felt a lot longer than that, but that's because it's timing in slow mode. So to get the period, you need to take that time and divide it by 3. So that would be 0.57. Please don't go to any more than 2 decimal places at the absolute most. You could even round that to 0.6. Notice if you put this in normal, you can see how fast it's bouncing. That's why I highly recommend the slow mode for this. Right, so now you're going to change the mass 3 more times, keep everything else the same, and then write out, does the mass affect the period? So yes or no, and if it does, if the mass gets bigger, how does that affect the period? Does it get bigger or smaller? For evidence, exactly what are you looking at? And for reasoning, try to explain why you think that's occurring. When you are done with that, the next thing you are going to do in the assignment, you can see that you also have the Google Sheet. So you're going to put in your mass data. Now I am completely making this data up, so do not use this data. It is not going to give you the results you should get anyways. I would suggest putting in the number 0, 0 as well, so you have that data point, because if there's no mass, the period would be 0. And then you're going to put in the period. And again, this relationship that I'm using right here is incorrect, so please don't use that. Right, then to create the graph, you go to Insert, Chart. Make sure you were clicked on an empty space. You're going to change this to scatter plot. For add x-axis, you're going to select the mass data. Make sure you don't have any units here. If it says grams or seconds next to all of these, it's not going to work. Then click add series, and you're going to click that data, and then you're going to get a graph. You are going to need to determine what type of graph it is, if it is square roots or whatever else it could be, linear, quadratic, all of those different things. Notice this is part 5 that I'm referring to, so make sure you answer that question as well and put your graph in here. All right, so on the graph, also make sure you go to customize. The chart title needs to be period versus mass. You always do y-axis versus x-axis. The horizontal axis was mass, make sure you have units. The vertical axis is period, and again, make sure you have units. Okay, so again, on the activity, that's parts 1 and 5 that I just showed you. For part 2, you are going to go through, but in this case, you are going to change the displacement. So you're going to pull it down different amounts and see what happens, and so on.